Good morning. Good morning. My name is Brian Watson, and welcome to the Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Please rise in body or spirit as you are able to sing our call to worship, hymn number 360 in the gray hymnal, Here We Have Gathered. Once again, welcome to the Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We are so glad to be here together in this loving, vibrant, beautiful community. Whoever you are, wherever you have come from, for this hour, we here are one gathered congregation, and all are welcome. My name is Brian Watson. I'm a 53-year-old man with a bald head, shaven face, and glasses, and today I'm wearing a white and green and blue striped plaid shirt, and I use he, him pronouns. I've been attending KUUF for over 20 years, and this religious community means a great deal to me. I've served on numerous committees over the years, and currently serve on the nominating committee, the Buildings and Grounds Committee, as well as play percussion with Brian on Sundays. Thank you. I also lay lead Sunday services, and it is a pleasure to be with you, to be here with you today, whether you're here in the sanctuary or joining us on YouTube. Our worship leader this morning is Melody Moberg. Melody is a Seattle-based UU ministerial candidate and spiritual director who graduated with a Master of Divinity from Seattle University last year. Welcome, Melody. I'd like to extend a special welcome to all of you who are visiting, especially if this is your first time. If you are here in person, we all look forward to welcoming you outside after the service, or inside for that matter. If you're joining us on YouTube, please introduce yourselves in the chat. Regardless of how you're joining us, we are glad that you're here. I invite you to follow along in the order of service. For those of you attending virtually, all the links for this service, including the order of service, are on our website and in this morning's worship service email. If you are here in the sanctuary this morning, please silence your cell phones. And I need to do that. I'll do that in a moment. The announcements are available on our website, keuf.org, or in our weekly email newsletter. And now I'd like to invite a couple people up, maybe just one person, two people, to come up to make a very special announcement.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, everybody. I'm Alina Hemingway. I'm a 37-year-old woman with long brown hair and a 6-week-old baby in my arms. So if you hear something, that's what that is. Well, how many of you missed the choir? Okay, a few. Well, good. Glad to hear it, because we're coming back. Yes, and I'll be the director. So if you have sung with us before, or you have been dying to sing with us forever, or you just think maybe you might like to sing with us, please don't hesitate to come over and say hi to me after the service, and we'll get you hooked up with information. And we'll have our first rehearsal on the 18th here at 6:30. That's a Thursday. Thursday, the 18th at 6:30. See you all later.
I love how she said, I'm Alina Hemingway, and I'll be the director. And those of you who know Alina know that that is an incredible understatement. So if you are at all wanting to sing, be there, okay? I'm just telling you, be there. I will be. So thank you, Alina, and we're really, really glad that you're going to do this. Thank you. And thanks to Mike for being our former choir director for so many years. Strong assistant, yes. So thank you both. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the Aboriginal territory of the Suquamish people, expert fishermen, canoe builders, and basket weavers. The Suquamish live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's central Salish Sea, as they have for thousands of years. Here, the Suquamish live and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Our opening words are lyrics from the Chalice Camp song by Lila Ibrahim and Rumi. It's a blessing you were born, and it matters what you do. What you know about God is a piece of the truth. May the beauty you love be what you do, and you don't have to do it alone. We'd like to welcome Sam Stevens now forward to light our chalice. Please join me now in lighting our chalice. If you have a chalice at home or candle at home, please light it as I read our chalice lighting words by Eric Heller Wagner. Blessed is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit, touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life. Now, please join me now in speaking our spoken affirmation. The words will appear on the screen. We gather as a caring community, seeking life's deeper meanings. We value diversity and affirm the worth of all living things. We strive to speak truth in love, to act for justice, to grow in spirit, and to care for the earth. We celebrate with open hearts and minds the creative power that sustains and transforms us. Our next hymn is Love Will Guide Us, written by Sally Rogers. The tune to Love Will Guide Us is actually named Olympia, after Olympia Brown, the first woman to be fully ordained in the United States in the Universalist Church. So please rise in body and spirit to sing hymn number 131 in your gray hymnal, Love Will Guide Us. All right, now I'd like to introduce Melody Moberg for our Time for All Ages. Melody?
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm impressed with the many different things you're doing as a worship leader today. It's such a pleasure to be here at this congregation this morning. Today's Time for All Ages story is called Trees for Kenya. It's a story about Wangari Maathai from a lovely UU curriculum called Circle of Trees, which is all about how trees are a way of connecting to the natural world and ourselves. So this is a story about planting trees, and I'm curious how many of you have planted trees before. Can you raise your hand? Yeah, it's pretty impressive. How many of you liked planting the trees? Awesome. That's also good. So Wangari Maathai was once a girl growing up in central Kenya in Africa in the 1950s. At this time, the land was green, the streams were full, and the trees grew thick and lush. To help her family, Wangari gathered firewood from the trees around her village. On her first day gathering firewood, her mother told her, "Don't collect any firewood from a fig tree." Wangari asked, "Why not?" And her mother answered, "That is a tree of God. We don't cut it, we don't burn it, we don't use it." And so Wangari was careful, along with the rest of the village, to let the fig trees live a good long time. She didn't know it then, but the roots of the fig tree helped draw water to the surface from deep below the earth. Until they fell to the ground naturally of old age, the fig trees helped the Kenyan soil stay fresh, rich, and alive. Wangari was smart, and she worked hard in school. And when she grew up, she went to America to study biology in college. But when she returned 6 years later, Kenya had changed. Many trees were cut down for new buildings and for huge coffee and tea plantations. And in some places, the land was bare, the streams had dried up, and even the fig trees had been cut. No one thought to put in new trees. Kenya was a desert, and that was hard for the birds, insects, and many other animals. It was hard for people, too. Soon Wangari was hearing from women in Kenya that many people didn't have enough to eat. Clean water was hard to find, and so was firewood for cooking. Wangari listened to the women who spoke to her, and she got an idea. Wangari's idea to help everything was to plant trees. She planted small seedling trees in her own backyard, right in the city. And when she saw the trees growing strong and green, she taught the women in her village to plant trees as well, and gave out seedlings to plant. When other women in the village saw that the earth was turning green again, they wanted to plant trees too. And soon Wangari started a nursery, and she was giving seedlings to women all over Kenya. She paid them money for each tree that they planted and kept alive, which helped the women buy food. Some people laughed and said women couldn't plant trees, but more and more women did, and the dried brown land in Kenya turned soft and green again. But the cutting of trees did continue. Wangari tried to protect the trees, and she told the tree cutters to stop. She didn't believe that so much building was needed. But powerful people disagreed with her, and Wangari ended up getting arrested, and she went to jail for what she believed in so strongly. But others continued to plant trees and protect those that were alive. And eventually, Wangari Maathai was released from jail. As more trees were planted, the desert was pushed away and the land came back to life. Streams flowed once more, and the soil became healthy and rich again. More and more people helped plant trees, and by 2004, when Wangari won the Nobel Peace Prize, more than 30 million trees had been planted, and Kenya was green again. The end.
Thank you, Melody. And now please join in singing our children's recessional. The words will appear on the screen. Rise as you're able to. We gather as a religious community to give each one of us a place where we can do the work of many. Together, our light is much brighter than a solitary flame. Now is the time in our service when we share in the sacred act of giving, an expression of gratitude transformed into generosity that breathes life into our mission. As part of our mission that inspires us to act on our beliefs, we share our weekly offering with a local nonprofit agency providing services within our larger community. Our charitable giving recipient for the month of May is the Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center, a local nonprofit and the only organization in Puget Sound that provides immigrant-centric family, immigration, legal, tax, and business services. And I believe we have a video that talks about kayak.
Hi, KUUF. My name's Kim. I'm one of the team members over here at Kayak, or Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center. I'm just reaching out to thank you for your generosity and support of our mission. In so many ways, individuals there at KUUF and the Social Justice Committee and KUUF as a whole really impacts the work that we're able to do for our immigrant neighbors. And I just wanted to reach out and say thank you for your support of our mission. If at any point anyone has questions about what we do at Kayak, or you want to come in and have a tour of our facility, or you want to hear a little bit more about what we're up to or get involved, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll make sure that my contact information is provided. But thank you so much for your generosity and for your support of our mission. Take care.
Nice. In a moment, our ushers will move among us with baskets to collect the offering. Donations placed in the basket will go to Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center. If you'd like your offering to be used for KUUF, please use one of the envelopes provided to you with the order of service when you came into the sanctuary. For those of you joining online, you may go to our website, kuuf.org, and select the Giving tab for PayPal and mailing information. And if this is your first time at KUUF, feel free to let the basket pass you by. Your presence is your gift. Let there now be an offering to strengthen and sustain our community, which is sacred to so many of us. Let's enjoy a gift of music from Brian Kinney. Thank you so much, Brian. Now is the time in our service for the sharing of joys and sorrows. When shared together, our joys are amplified and our sorrows are lessened. We have several today. This is from Aaron Braybrook, who asks us to help send thoughts for good health and courage to Flossie Bodie, who is the wife of Reverend Bruce Bodie, who is a frequent worship leader in our congregation during her ongoing medical treatments that she's undergoing. And we have a joy from Megan Shepherd that her daughter, Addison, hits double digits tomorrow. All right, buckle up. It just gets more fun. That's wonderful. Jessica Dimmick continues to have significant health challenges. She asks that we keep her in your thoughts and prayers. And I would like to light a candle for my father, Larry Watson, who is a horticulturalist and has planted thousands and thousands and thousands of trees in his lifetime and taught me how to plant trees. And I've planted quite a few myself. So thank you, Dad. And we light one last candle for those joys and sorrows that are still too tender to share. Please join me in a moment of prayer or intention. In the spirit of community, in which we find strength and common purpose, we share our joys, our sorrows, our hopes, and dreams. We have turned our minds and hearts toward one another in trust, giving love, seeking comfort, and celebrating together. We are part of the web of life that makes us one with all humanity, one with all the universe. In all the moments of our lives, for those loved ones and events shared this morning, and for those we yet hold in the silence of our hearts, we are truly grateful for the love and support of this beloved community. May the spirit of life and love bring peace to us all. Amen, and blessed be. Please remain seated as we sing Spirit of Life, hymn 123 in our gray hymnal. The words will also appear on your screen.
Today's reading is from the journalist Krista Tippett. She writes, "Hope is for me distinct from idealism and optimism. It has nothing to do with wishful thinking. It's a muscle, a practice, a choice to live open-eyed and wholehearted in the world as it is and not as we wish it to be. We are strange creatures. We mask fear with rage, despair with violence. Growth is always messy and never linear. We have so far to go to live into our name, Homo sapiens, the creatures that are wise, and we may never get there. And yet I know that in life and society, wisdom emerges precisely in those moments when we have to hold seemingly opposing realities in creative tension. Power and frailty, birth and death, pain and hope, beauty and brokenness, mystery and conviction, calm and fierceness, mine and yours. Please join me now for a moment of reflection, followed by our post-reflection music. I worked as a UU religious educator for 10 years, and I had to make a lot of lesson plans. But one lesson plan that I really struggled to make was on climate change. Addressing climate change with children feels so tender. They're inheriting a world where the stakes are high and old solutions are no longer viable. I struggled to create lesson plans which laid out the real stakes of climate change and expressed the ways that adults have failed to contain it. Many people ask me if they can come in and educate kids about climate change, often with graphs and statistics, and what I found is that children are aware of climate change. They know about it, don't need to be convinced, and they're terrified. I struggled to imagine stories, activities, art projects, service projects that could help children learn about climate change and feel agency rather than despair. I struggled because climate change is an existential threat that becomes more and more real every year. It's an existential threat which compounds existing inequities. Climate change disproportionately impacts people of color, those at the margins, people with disabilities. I struggled most of all with how to create lesson plans that expressed hope, real hope, hope that I myself felt viscerally, hope that is honest. And it doesn't feel honest to say that we're guaranteed to stop or reverse climate change. Sometimes I would fantasize about what it might have been like being a religious educator in the 1970s, what it might be like to make lesson plans about the environment that didn't have to deal with climate change. When faced with the particular challenges of our time, it is so tempting to romanticize the past. I imagine making environmentalist lesson plans in the 1970s would be simple, but that is simply not true. I wished that I could make lesson plans about recycling, picking up trash, turning off water. I wish that these small personal actions were truly the right-sized solutions to this kind of problem. Fantasies ignore things. And my rose-tinted fantasy of the 1970s didn't include the existential threats of its time. It didn't include the threat of nuclear waste and war. I don't know what it's like, thankfully, to be surrounded by polluted waterways and lakes and streams. I don't know what it was like to be an activist in the 1970s, grappling with the true existential threats of that time. Hope is a complex thing. We're living in uncertain times where the stakes are high and things look bleak. Roe v. Wade overturned, ongoing transphobia, threats to bodily autonomy, racism, injustice, violence, and climate change. The threats are so vast and existential, it's hard to wrap our minds around them. And our minds really aren't designed to process big existential threats like these. The stakes are high, and yet simultaneously we live in an overwhelmingly optimistic culture, a culture that's obsessed with the individual consumer. And I wonder if you've ever heard the story that though things look bad, if you just buy the right kind of reusable water bottle, you can save the world. And in our culture, focusing on just consumer solutions is so easy and simple, and it protects the corporations who most endanger the planet. Unfortunately, I believe that there's no singular action that one ordinary person can take to end climate change. And the narratives of hope based on singular actions that say otherwise are false or incomplete. Sometimes hope can feel insincere, like forcing a smile. We're in an optimistic society which seeks to ignore and numb pain, and maybe this pain is grief for the environment. When pain arises, we're asked to grit our teeth and to look on the bright side. We're asked to drown pain through distractions or addictions. And it's particularly American to numb pain through making money and spending money. And all the while, culture calls on us to be shallowly optimistic and hopeful. We're meant to be always making ourselves better, finding hope in makeovers and get-rich-quick schemes and face serums, remodeling projects, self-help books, or biohacking. We're meant to be always optimizing ourselves and making ourselves more marketable. The Reverend Nancy MacDonald Ladd grapples with the problem of hope as optimism in her book, After the Good News, progressive faith beyond optimism. This UU minister begins with the story of a failed utopia, of an attempt by the 19th century optimist, Robert Owens, to create a utopia of his own vision in MacDonald Ladd's hometown of New Harmony, Indiana. Owens was a wealthy industrialist and a self-identified social reformer. He was convinced by the brilliance of his own ideas and his own ability to create a world that reflected them. He knew that he could create a utopia of, quote, shared property, intellectual advancement, and educational reform, unquote. And so Owens purchased land in New Harmony, and he recruited East Coast intellectuals to populate the community. He collected brilliant poets, scientists, and philosophers who were ready to shape a new world. He posted an ad in the newspaper that invited commoners to join as well. And that ad that welcomed all who sought to build a new world very notably said that people of color were not invited to join. Robert Owens' utopia didn't last long. His group of white intellectuals notably didn't include farmers. And that's very important for any agriculturally based community to function. And it turns out that local artisans and farmers were really reluctant to sign up for Owens' project, which they saw as paternalistic. Though all were supposed to labor equally in this community, the intellectuals ended up shirking their duties and the workers ended up doing all the work. The intellectuals held power and property, workers did all the laboring, racism prevailed, and Robert Owens, despite his non-hierarchical vision, still found himself holding the roles of, quote, bank landlord, and overseer. In this story, Robert Owens had a lot of optimistic faith in himself. And his high appraisal of himself and his skills led him to impose his vision of hope on others. Hope is complicated, and the unchecked optimism of Robert Owens is an example of hope gone wrong, hope as arrogance and ego. The Reverend Nancy MacDonald Ladd explains that Owens represents historical tendencies that persist in liberal religion, a tendency to profess universalist ideals, but to practically continue to center white people and the privileged, an unwillingness for privileged reformers to perceive or atone for the ways that they benefit from the oppression of others, and a habit, she writes, of, quote, parachuting in from out of town or out of context on projects of benevolent paternalism not grounded in authentic relationship to the communities affected. We see this pattern of paternalistic philanthropy in our world today. In models of philanthropy that allow the rich and powerful to impose their vision of a better world on others, rather than asking what impacted communities may need. In the ultra-wealthy seeking to solve hunger in distant places with technological, industrial farming methods not suited to those regions. A model of top-down change-making rooted in arrogance and certainty rather than models of mutuality and mutual empowerment. In our Time for All Ages story, we see a different model for change. Wangari Maathai enacted transformative change through tree planting because she came from the impacted community she sought to transform. She remembered the cultural message that the fig tree is a tree of God, that you shouldn't cut it, burn it, or use it at all. And she saw the opportunity to teach women and compensate them for planting trees. She drew on knowledge of her culture and her land in order to create change. I believe there's a deeper and truer hope, though, beyond false smiles and unchecked optimism, a hope that's honest and sees reality. The first feature of a deeper and truer hope can be found in the hope of a wider story. In After the Good News, MacDonald Ladd also addresses the limitations of optimism in worship services. In the Protestant tradition, ministers are said to preach the good news. And of course, for many Christians, the good news is a phrase that can only mean the story of Jesus. Unitarian Universalist ministers have more freedom in what they can preach, but this expectation of preaching the good news lives on in a broader way. There's enormous pressure to uplift some kind of good news in worship, a message of hope, ways that individuals can contribute, opportunities to change the world. And this hopeful model for ministry and worship isn't necessarily bad. It is healing and it is meaningful. But it's a problem when the only kind of worship that's acceptable is preaching the good news. It's troublesome when this message of optimism is pushed over authenticity. Good news is not the whole story. Sometimes tragedy strikes, and sometimes we're met with losses beyond comprehension. Worship services which explicitly make space for grief can be so powerful. Candlelit vigils after traumatic events. A memorial service, impactful in its simplicity and its honesty. Services of lamentation that invite people to show up feeling hopeless. Worship services that can hold space for uncertainty. Good news isn't the whole story. We're not meant for endless optimism. We are human beings with complex lives touched by suffering. And another angle to this is that while the good news isn't the whole story, suffering isn't the whole story either. As a UU at a progressive Christian seminary, I learned a lot about hope from my Christian classmates. For them, the religious story of the resurrection shapes their broader thinking about hope, and it offers a narrative of hope broader than the actions of individual people. In the week leading up to Easter, or Holy Week, my classmates followed Christian traditions that took them on an emotional journey through Jesus' ministry, death, and resurrection. And when reflecting on this story, my classmates would consistently share a very powerful phrase, and that is that suffering doesn't have the last word. I find a deeper and truer hope in the story that suffering doesn't have the last word. I can trust in the turning of the seasons, in natural cycles of growth, death, compost, and rebirth. I trust in the model of nurse logs in our own rainforests, the trunks of dead trees that support new saplings. Life growing out of death. Suffering doesn't have the last word. And even when suffering feels inescapable, this is true. Even in the aftermath of tragedy, and even when any reality beyond suffering is incomprehensible. Suffering isn't the end of the sentence. There's always another day. There's always a little more space, a little more kindness. And in the words of the hymn, there is more love somewhere. Another source of a deeper and truer hope comes from a hope which creates space rather than covers over. I occasionally listen to guided meditations by the Buddhist teacher Tara Brach, and she offers prompts to awaken presence and feelings of aliveness during meditation. One of these prompts, which feels so powerful to me, is to bring a small smile to the corners of your mouth as you're meditating, and to gradually bring this feeling of a smile to other parts of the body, like the corners of the eyes or the heart. In her meditations, Tara Brach calls this small smile a smile, quote, not to cover over, but to open up space for what's here, unquote. A smile to create space for possibility. There are studies that report that making yourself smile can trigger neurological processes which actually kick up feel-good hormones. And of course, we need to accept reality. Forcing a smile to cover over your feelings never feels good. Tara Brach offers a middle path between seeing what is and faking happiness. Trying a small smile at the corners of the mouth during meditation as an opening and invitation, creating space, not covering over. And hope is like this too. Forcing capital H hope when you're in despair feels inauthentic. Assuming that you can only be accepted by others through faking hope deepens feelings of isolation and pain. But engaging hope like the smallest smile at the corners of your lips can create inner space. An active process of engaging hope, like a small smile at the lips, just might create space for authentic hope to grow. As we heard earlier in our essay on hope by Krista Tippett, she writes that hope is a muscle, a practice, and a choice. To live open-heartedly and wholeheartedly in the world as it is, and not as we wish it to be. The California-based religious educator Lila Ibrahim created a song with profound lyrics for Chalice Camp, which is a UU elementary day camp. One line of it comes from the 13th century Sufi mystic poet Rumi. The lyrics are theological statement and read as follows. It's a blessing you were born, and it matters what you do. What you know about God is a piece of the truth. May the beauty you love be what you do, and you don't have to do it alone. The model of Chalice Camp was picked up by many UU congregations, including the one I served previously. These short and memorable statements continue to stick with me, especially the last one. You don't have to do it alone. And this is my third source of a deeper and truer hope. We can't change the world alone, and trying to change the world by yourself ends up like Robert Owens and his failed utopia. There's no singular action that one ordinary person can take that will end climate change or forever enact justice. But luckily, we're not alone. We're embedded in communities and congregations, movements where we can work together for change and justice. And even if our worst fears are realized and it's impossible to halt or reverse something like climate change, there is still a space for hope, though this hope might look different than we imagined. In the book, A Paradise Built in Hell, Rebecca Solnit opens the book with an account of an 8-year-old Dorothy Day watching the aftermath of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. The disaster must have been terrifying to her as a child. But after the earthquake, what Dorothy Day remembered were people helping each other. She saw people sharing food and clothing, helping each other set up tents, creating community in the wake of disaster. Day was later called to a life of activism and care for the poor as the founder of the Catholic worker movement. Dorothy Day wrote in her autobiography of the earthquake, quote, "While the crisis lasted, people loved each other," unquote. We tend to imagine disasters will only awaken the ugliest and worst parts of people. Rebecca Solnit offers a counter-narrative exploring the many ways that people do care for each other in the wake of disaster. Rather than fighting for resources or reacting with violence, so many times people rise to the occasion of crisis with purposefulness, longing to create community. Solnit argues that disasters actually worsen when governmental and humanitarian aid assumes the worst about people. For example, by assuming that a community will contain violence or looting. Even the most somber circumstances are still possible for hope in community. Hope is complex. Hope can be used to silence and cover over what's real. Hope can be misapplied as arrogant optimism imposed on others by the privileged. And yet there is a deeper and truer hope in a wider story, in hope which creates space rather than covers over, and in community, in the truth that we don't have to do it alone. May it be so, and blessed be. And now, please rise in body or in spirit to join in our closing hymn, number 95, There is More Love Somewhere.
Melody, first of all, thank you. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
And what a great message for all of us. After the service is over today, please exit through the foyer, into the foyer. Coffee and tea will be served out on the breezeway, and you're welcome to enjoy the treats and coffee out there or bring your treats and coffee here inside the building. And say hello to someone you've never met before. Ellie.
There is a new KUF conversation in the Elmore room right after the service as well.
And let me just repeat that so everyone can hear that. Ellie wanted to let us know that there is a new to UU workshop today at 11:45 in the Elmore room, which is the room right outside these foyer doors. Please join us if you're curious about Unitarian Universalism or our church. Thank you, Ellie. And now you.
Our closing words come from Lisa Friedman. Spirit of life and love, we live in a fragmented world that tempts us to despair. We would put it back together piece by piece if it was ours to choose. But sometimes the fragments are enough. In a world of cruelty, there is still power in every act of kindness. In a world of doubt, there is still power in every act of hope. In an age of division, there is still power in every act of unity. May we remember that sometimes the fragments of meaning we make are just the right size to hold in our hands. Blessed be.